Failed experiment, according to some. What's the end date for using motels for emergency housing? We'll also talk to the government about its plan for future COVID boosters. Minister Aisha Verrall's here with the details. The project to track air quality and ventilation in schools. And the big cheese of fromage making in New Zealand is faced with a staffing meltdown. And forget Watership Down, Botany Downs is where the rogue bunnies are at. Don't forget, you can watch us Sky Channel 83, Freeview Channel 50. RNZ News at 5. Ahi Maria, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The Muslim community has condemned the Christchurch mosque terrorists' legal appeal as an attempt to use the justice system as a platform for hate speech. Brenton Tarrant has filed an appeal against his conviction and life sentence for the murder of 51 people in 2019. The Federation of Islamic Associations says it's not surprised by the move, which shadows the strategy used by the Norway terrorist who lost an appeal to the European Court of Human Rights after killing 77 people. The association says Tarrant's appeal is a blatant and calculated attempt to re-traumatise the Christchurch victims and the nation while showing he has no remorse. It condemns what it calls the sinister abuse of the law, but affirms an individual's right to due process. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says she won't comment on the decision to appeal. Jacinda Ardern says she made a commitment after the mosque attack not to publicly name the terrorist.
His is a story that should not be told. His is a name that should not be repeated. And I'm going to apply that same rule in commenting on his attempts to re-victimise people. We should give him nothing.
Ukrainians arriving in New Zealand on a humanitarian visa say they're struggling to find jobs or housing with no way to access welfare support. 404 people have arrived on the 2022 special Ukraine visa announced by the government in March. That's 1/10 of the people the government said it could help. Irina Barbasheva says she came to Aotearoa wanting to breathe out and feel safe after the war, but she says she ended up with nowhere to live and was told that the Ministry of Social Development couldn't help her.
I don't have a job in that time and I didn't know what to do. This was very dark.
You can hear more on the story on Checkpoint shortly. The Finance Minister is defending the reappointment of Adrian Orr as Reserve Bank Governor in the face of fierce criticism from the opposition. National and ACT say the jury is still out on whether the actions of the central bank in past years have really ended up being in the best interests of New Zealanders and the economy. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
High bank profits, inflation out of control and house prices taking a dive. All grist for the mill for the opposition, questioning the reappointment of Mr Orr. He says a 5-year review due out Thursday will provide an objective assessment. Finance Minister Grant Robertson says he was happy to accept the unanimous recommendation from the bank's board, and now is the time for continuity and stability. National is demanding an independent review, pledging to trigger one if elected next year.
A Waiuku local says she's holding on to hope in the search for the child missing after a boat capsized in Auckland's Manukau Harbour. The police are continuing an aerial search for the boy, who was among 5 people on the boat when it tipped over on Sunday evening. 1 person on the boat died and 3 others were hospitalised. Jay from Waiuku says many in the community are helping search along the coast.
I just hope that they find him alive. That would be best case scenario. But I hope the family get closure and, the little boy's brought home for them.
And huge crowds are revelling in the return of Cup Day without COVID restrictions in Christchurch today. More than 15,000 people are at Addington for the New Zealand Trotting Cup. The race was held behind closed doors last year due to COVID restrictions. Senior Sergeant Phil Newton says everyone is having a great time.
It's been really good so far. It's a great day for the punters to come to the races. It's a good atmosphere and at the moment everybody's behaving themselves.
The main race gets underway just after 5:30 with defending champion Copy That, the favourite. In other sport, the Black Ferns are embracing their underdog status ahead of Saturday's Rugby World Cup final showdown against England. Not only are England the number 1 ranked team, they're also on a 30-match winning streak and comfortably beat New Zealand in 2 tests late last year. Black Ferns loose forward Sarah Hidini says there's no doubt who the favourites are.
We're definitely underdogs. I think we came into this tournament ranked number 3, now probably ranked number 2. They are the team to beat, and we've definitely talked about it like that, so we know that we have to do everything right. We can't make basic errors like we probably did in that semi-final.
The Black Ferns have suffered a setback ahead of the final, with number 8 Liana Michaela Tu'u ruled out with a broken thumb. Meanwhile, tournament organisers are releasing a limited number of additional tickets for the match. And former Australian batting star turned Pakistan mentor Matthew Hayden believes Pakistan are the side no one wants to play at the T20 Cricket World Cup. New Zealand will play them in the first semi-final tomorrow night in Sydney, after Pakistan only snuck into the final 4 thanks to the Netherlands' shock win over South Africa. After Pakistan's final pool match, Hayden spoke to the players in the changing rooms.
The moment that Pakistan cricket fires off with intent and starts to reveal its teeth, we become a real threat. There would be no one in this world, in this competition, that would want to face us right now. Not one.
Tomorrow's semi-final is at 9 p.m. That's the news.
Another climate warning.
The clock is ticking. We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator.
More questions for our banks.
Do you think banks in New Zealand are making too much profit?
That's really a difficult question to answer.
And a classic album turns 50.
Plucked her eyebrows on the way, shaved her legs, and then he was a she. She says, hey babe, take a walk on the wild side.
Take a walk with us. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on the RNZ app on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery, gradually easing tomorrow. Waikato and Bay of Plenty, cloud increasing, a few showers tomorrow, some heavy in the afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine today, but isolated showers south of Hastings. Rain spreading south tomorrow morning, possibly heavy in Gisborne. From Waitomo to Wellington and Wairarapa, including the Central High Country, also Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland, mainly fine, isolated afternoon and evening showers inland, some possibly heavy. Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine and warm, but a few afternoon and evening showers, possibly heavy tomorrow with cloud increasing later. Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods, a few showers mainly near the coast. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy with 1 or 2 showers, clearing tomorrow morning. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I will have news headlines and traffic for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi, Evie. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The government can't give a deadline for phasing out emergency motel accommodation, but the Minister says she'll reveal the results of a review and a redesign by the end of the year. A bloody fiasco, a failed government experiment and tantamount to child abuse, just some of the descriptions of the motel accommodation. Resource consent is being sought for 13 Rotorua motels to keep operating as emergency housing for another 5 years. Motels were supposed to be a short-term solution, but the bill for the scheme is topping $1 billion since Labor took office in 2017, and some families have now lived in motels for a year or more. I asked the Minister for Social Development, Carmel Sepuloni, how much longer the government needed to use motels to house families.
The problem was that we inherited a housing crisis and the houses hadn't been built. So we're working hard to build those houses and we've seen the results of that. But it's going to take some time to be able to meet the demand that's out there.
What's the expiration date for that excuse, Minister, saying that it's another government that caused the problem?
Look, if we weren't seeing the housing being built, whether it be public housing or the kind of settings and investment being put in place so that private property development could go underway, then I'd be worried. But we are seeing the progress, and as I said, we're seeing a steady decline, and we've just got to continue to make that progress.
Why not give us an exit date?
Because that would be insincere of me, because we don't have a time frame on it, and so all we've
Isn't that the problem, though, Minister? Isn't that the problem?
It would be a huge problem if we weren't building the houses, Lisa, but we are building the houses and we're seeing them go up at a record rate. And so the work is underway. And so that by doing that, then moving forward, we'll be able to resolve the issue that we have with emergency housing.
Children are essentially being born into and raised effectively in single rooms, overcrowded situations. If they're lucky, they've got a car park to play in. What do you think that does to a generation of children? living in those conditions.
No one wants to see any child growing up in emergency housing, Lisa. But this is the situation that we inherited. We're addressing it by building the houses. But
Again, Minister, and I am sorry to interrupt you, but you have been in government for 5 years. So at what point do you cease using that as an excuse? Inheritance.
Oh, look, it's in government, but it's decades of underinvestment in housing that we're responding to, Lisa. And so we're doing the job. We're seeing more public houses built than what we've seen, I think, since the 70s. And so there's huge investment going in here. This will make the difference, but it does take some time.
The head of the whānau order commissioning agency, Merepeka Raukawa-Tate, says it's tantamount to child abuse, having children raised in these circumstances. Do you agree?
Well, the alternative was that people would have nowhere to stay, Lisa, and so it is not the ideal. We'd prefer that this didn't have to be an option, but because we didn't come into government with the houses that needed to be in place, and it takes some time to build them, then we're still in a situation where we're in the progress of building those houses.
So how many kids are living in motels? It's about 5,000, isn't it?
It is about 5,000.
And do you not have concerns that this is child abuse?
Well, you know, when we took over in terms of government, there were families in emergency accommodation that were getting no active case management. They weren't getting the additional wraparound support that they needed. Many of them have other social challenges that I guess have contributed to the fact that they have become homeless. And so we need to be working fulsomely with these families, and that's what we're doing.
Reports of a gang rape and standover tactics to get women in emergency motels to work as prostitutes. What have you done since that came to light?
Look, we're really clear that, of course, that's unacceptable, and of course that's not something that we want to see. But we also need to have that reported to us so that we can respond to the complaints that are happening. We also need the authorities to be involved, because those types of issues are police issues and they're the right authorities to respond to it. If families feel unsafe, then we're really clear that we will work with them to move them to where they feel safe. And so we need these whānau that experience these things to let their case managers know that this is what's happening.
Do you, Minister, in order to do anything? The issue is in the public domain. The ministry surely has a responsibility to ensure that it is contracting safe accommodation services. Are they living up to that obligation?
Certainly, where we receive complaints around safety, then MSD moves quickly to move families to where they are safe. And so, but we can't respond if people don't tell us what is going on.
But you know what's going on now. It's in the public domain.
It's case by case. When something happens like that, Lisa, then we need to be told. And that isn't always the case, and we really encourage our clients to come forward.
Why don't MSD and the police have an information sharing arrangement so that they can better manage these dangers?
Well, MSD and police, there are some privacy issues with regard to sharing information, and I know you're aware of. But certainly there are multiple agencies and social services that are often involved in the lives of the people that are in emergency accommodation, because we have moved to make sure that they get the intensive wraparound support that they need.
Minister, what's happened with the review and redesign?
So you can expect to hear something regarding that before the end of the year. And also keeping in mind...
So are you announcing an exit plan, Minister, before the end of the year?
We will be announcing the finding of the reviews before the end of the year. And there was $355 million attached to that review. And so we'll be able to talk about where that money might be spent.
That's Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni. It is 14 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and we're interested in your thoughts on that. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. No exit date for phasing out emergency motel accommodation. What do you think of that and why? The reappointment of Adrian Orr as Reserve Bank Governor for another 5 years has prompted political outrage, with the opposition demanding evidence he deserves a second term. The central bank has been under scrutiny for its actions in recent years and whether that's contributed to bank profits and the cost of living crisis. The Finance Minister fully backs Mr Orr, saying now is the time for continuity and stability. But National wants an independent review, pledging to trigger one if elected next year. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Last week, Adrian Orr was talking financial stability, but was pressed on whether the bank had hit the right note with monetary policy. He deferred to a report due out this week, a 5-year review of the bank and its actions.
We can talk about the last 5 years till the cows come home post-November 10, but it will be fact-based, not assertion.
National, however, is heavily critical the decision to reappoint him has already been made.
It's utterly hypocritical of Jacinda Ardern and Grant Robertson not to have an independent review of the Reserve Bank and monetary policy actions that have contributed and led to large bank profits.
The Reserve Bank printed tens of billions of dollars, had a lending program that made money virtually free for the commercial banks. And all we're saying is, don't you think you should take a look at whether the right decisions have been made here?
Ex-David Seymour also with plenty to say.
This is the guy that printed tens of billions of dollars, which is now sloshing around as rising prices for everyone and everything they buy. There's no accountability, there's no consequence under Labour. Just like Trevor Mallard getting a sweet 5 years in Dublin, Adrian Orr is getting a sweet 5 years in the Reserve Bank as if nothing's gone wrong.
The 5-year review is due out on Thursday, but National's Nicola Willis says it cannot be seen as independent, having been done by hand-picked experts and staff from the bank.
It's a bit like saying to someone, look, you mark your own homework and then pick your favourite teacher to tell you whether or not you've done a good job. And we think a more robust approach is necessary.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson says he was happy to accept the unanimous recommendation from the bank's board.
We do need continuity and stability at this time. New Zealand's overall performance when it comes to the issues that the bank is responsible for does compare well with the rest of the world.
The board runs the appointment process and the minister accepts or rejects the recommendation. The government and other politicians are expected to be completely hands-off when it comes to how the bank operates. Nicola Willis was asked if National is pushing the boundaries and risking political interference.
Well, we've been very conscious of our responsibilities here. That's why for months we've been telegraphing our concerns by saying, please do an independent review. We've got questions, New Zealanders have questions.
Grant Robertson says the government is not bound by any obligations to look ahead to a possible change of government when making key appointments at this stage of the parliamentary term.
There's the standard convention about 3 months before an election. We're obviously well outside that period.
Mr Robertson says he did take account of some of the broad findings of the 5-year review, but that was only one aspect of his decision to accept the board's recommendation.
Jane Patterson reporting there. Ukrainians say they're escaping to New Zealand on a special humanitarian visa, only to find themselves locked out of jobs and housing and turned away from MSD offices. Last week, a Ukrainian support group pleaded with the Immigration Minister to expand the financial, language and health support for arrivals, claiming the lack of support had driven some of them back to their war-torn homeland. Katie Todd has the story.
When Irina Barbasheva, her husband and her 11-year-old daughter stepped off the plane in April, they had one 20-kilogram suitcase each and no money. She's among just over 1,000 people granted a 2022 special Ukraine visa since March, swapping dangerous streets of Kyiv for Tauranga. The visa was sponsored by her stepdaughter, who's living and studying at university here. But finding her own income took Ms. Barbasheva months longer than expected.
I hear everywhere New Zealand is short on staff in different areas, but then I'm going to interview and they're not taking me and I'm thinking,
Irina Barbasheva eventually scored a job as a store manager. She counts herself lucky because she can speak English. Her husband cannot. Housing has been another hurdle. Renting a 2-bedroom unit in Tauranga costs about 4 times what it does in Kiev. Ms. Barbasheva and her family have been shifting around short-term accommodation offered by church friends and relatives. At one stage, when they were about to become homeless, she turned to MSD. She says she was told she didn't qualify for support.
I don't have a job in that time, and I didn't know what to do. This was very dark.
Finding work has been even more challenging for Anna Drobot, who has fled from Dnipro to Auckland with her Ukrainian Kiwi partner. Anna waited 3 months before learning she didn't qualify for a 2022 special Ukraine visa, despite her partner being a New Zealand citizen. The special visas can only be sponsored by a blood relative. Anna says immigration suggested the option of a working holiday visa, which incurred another 3-month wait. And Ms. Drobot, a former procurement specialist, fears she'll have to wait until next year to work.
Coming from a country where it's war right now and not able to work and not able to support myself and, let's say, my family, it's a bit stressful. So I have to fully depend on my partner and his family, which is obviously not very good for my mental state.
Anna Drobot says the lack of support for Ukrainians here is in sharp contrast to overseas. In Europe, Ukrainians are greeted at the airport with pamphlets, information and offers of support. Back in Tauranga, Irina Barbasheva says she's come to love New Zealand's landscapes, active lifestyle and the school her daughter has settled in. But that comes with a looming sense of uncertainty around whether their special visa will be extended.
I can see us now staying here for another probably 10 years for sure. But we don't know what to expect. We don't know anything about what's going to happen with us after these 2 years.
Mahi for Ukraine co-founder Kate Turska believes the 2022 special Ukraine visa has failed in its execution. Since March, 404 people have used it to come here, just 1/10 of the 4,000 the government claimed it could help. Ms. Turska says people are being put off by high costs and a lack of support. She's questioning why Ukrainians are essentially just being offered a working visa instead of full wraparound support.
We definitely want to see what else can be done in order to support these Ukrainians who have been offered shelter in New Zealand. The Prime Minister has talked a big talk at the UN, and we really would like to see the Cabinet following through with some actions down here.
Mahi for Ukraine met with Immigration Minister Michael Wood last week, urging him to expand financial, English language and health assistance for Ukrainian arrivals. At the time, the minister said the special Ukraine visa was established on the understanding sponsors would take on the financial responsibility of the visa holders, including travel, accommodation and living costs. Checkpoint has contacted Immigration New Zealand and MSD for comment.
It's 22 after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Some of you getting in touch with us about our interview with Carmel Sepuloni about emergency housing. Government can't give an exit date for getting out of using motels. Marilyn says, isn't it better than being homeless? And someone else has got in touch to say the Labour government blame National for everything and don't have a clue. He aha o whakaaro, what do you think? Send us a text 2101. You can tweet us at checkpointrnz or email checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. We'd love to hear from you about that or anything else you've heard on the programme. It's time for us to get to the headlines. Ko ewe anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. The Minister for Social Development, Carmel Sepuloni, told Checkpoint she can't give a time frame for the phasing out of emergency motel accommodation. Resource consent is being sought for 13 Rotorua motels to keep operating as emergency housing for a further 5 years. Ms Sepuloni says it's going to take some time to meet housing demands. The Federation of Islamic Associations says the Christchurch mosque terrorists' legal appeal is a blatant and calculated attempt to re-traumatise the Christchurch victims and the nation as a whole, and shows he has no remorse. Brenton Tarrant filed an appeal last week against his conviction and life sentence without parole for the murder of 51 people in 2019. A Ukrainian who arrived in New Zealand on a humanitarian visa says she ended up with nowhere to live and was told that the Ministry of Social Development couldn't help her. 404 people have arrived on the 2022 special Ukraine visa announced by the government in March, 1/10 of the people the government said it could help. And in the US, candidates and leading political figures are making their final pitches on the eve of tomorrow's crucial midterm elections. The elections, which will decide control of Congress, could thwart President Biden's agenda for the remaining 2 years of his presidency. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, no unexpected delays on our roads at the moment, even though there's quite a bit of rain up and down the country. Several closures on secondary routes up and down Aotearoa though, so check before you travel. I'll have more news headlines and traffic for you at 5:40.
Kia ora rā e ho. Desperate for a ticket for this weekend's Rugby World Cup final, but didn't manage to get your hands on one? Well, there may be hope yet. A limited number of additional tickets will be released very soon for those who have missed out. Here with all the details is sports reporter Clay Wilson. OK, Clay, whose knee am I going to have to sit on at this point if I'm getting a ticket?
You just got to be fast on your mouse.
OK,
you know?
Cool.
So, of course, the semi-final on Saturday night was an amazing game, and in the hours after that, the organisers said they sold 8,000 tickets just like that, and it basically sold out the game for Saturday night. And the day since, they've done a bit of reworking, and they say they've opened up seats that were previously operational seats and weren't being sold to the public that are now going to be sold to the public. So still 40,000 capacity, just a few seats have been moved around for the public to get a few more punters in. They're not saying how many extra. I'm not sure why they're not saying, but we don't know how many. They say that, there's a decent enough number that if you're quick and you get in when the tickets go on sale, then you'll have a good chance of getting a seat. So the important details are 6 o'clock tonight, so about 35 minutes from now.
Get ready with your refresh button.
Exactly. People have got very good at this in recent years, haven't they? So they'll be available then on the Rugby World Cup 2021 website. So get into Google, tap it in and get at the ready if you want to grab one of those tickets.
OK, so if some of those seats were previously for operational, purposes, what about all the players wanting to get all their family and friends into Eden Park?
Yeah, well, of course, this is a very important occasion for the players and their family and friends, isn't it? They want to get as many of those people along as they can. And actually, assistant coach Wes Clarkey said today a lot of them have had family they didn't know they were family, and I think one of the players actually said that early in the tournament, suddenly get in touch, and it all adds to the week for them and what they're having to deal with. And actually, Georgia Ponsonby, the Black Ferns hooker, and Sarah Hiddeny, who's the flanker for the team, they got asked about the ticket demands they've had, and here's what they had to say.
We get given 4 tickets per player, and then I've asked for about 15 more. Whether I'll get those or not, I don't know. I've told my family I'm not organising anyone's tickets. So my hubby will get 4 and then he can distribute who he wants to. But they know not to ask me for any tickets.
4 tickets, that seems pretty lean.
That's pretty stingy, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, and a bit of a blow for the Black Ferns early this week.
Yeah, this is the only sore point really. So Wes Clark did confirm this morning that number 8, Liana Mikaeli-2, she's been ruled out of the final with a broken thumb. It is a decent blow for the Black Ferns. She started 4 of the 5 games and has been really one of the shining lights for the Black Ferns in that fullback. Has been a really abrasive player. The good news is that they have a very handy replacement option. The likely replacement for her is Kennedy Simon, who's the co-captain of the team, and she was, of course, the last player to feature because she'd been injured, and she came in off the bench for the quarterfinal. That was her first game back, and then she came off the bench again in the semi-final and actually made a really decent impact off the bench there. So that looks like who they'll go with, but of course it's always difficult when a player plays all the way, gets the team into the final, and then she can't play. You can't help but feel bad for her, but that is the nature of the sport, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Hey, and you had a lucky semi-final haircut and it got them over the line with just seconds to spare. So what's your ritual going to be for the final for the rugby?
I don't know. I can't have another haircut.
No, you'll have to think on that, and we'll check back in before the weekend.
Maybe I can.
Thanks, Clay. Clay Wilson, our sports reporter there. The joy of being declared Aotearoa's big cheese has melted a little into disappointment for an award-winning company that's been forced to close its Auckland bar. Oamaru's Whitestone Cheese has been voted New Zealand's favourite cheese company, but it's also had to shut its cheese bar in Wynyard Quarter because it simply can't find staff despite offering a souped-up deal. It's also struggling to find workers at its Oamaru factory. While joining us now is Whitestone Cheese Managing Director Simon Berry. Hey, congratulations, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
But I suppose it's kind of, well, it's a mixed bag, isn't it, when you've got this other stuff going on? What's the problem with staff in Auckland?
Yeah, well, I guess it's right through hospitality, and in Auckland we've been advertising for over 6 weeks now, and like literally no one's applied, and we've, like you said, we've sweetened the deal. But I think it's more of a labour crisis that we've found ourselves in here, and this is really a sort of a victim of that. And if you look at sort of the labour settings, or there's certain factors that are outside of our control, which is understandable. We've got this global shortage, everyone's looking for labour, but then we seem to keep making things harder at the immigration at the border. Like, I find the solution would be really simple if we could just stamp everyone in that is arriving with a 2-year work visa. Why do we need to go through all the procedure when the whole world is sort of short of labour? We've got people coming in to visit. Why not give them the option of working here? And just, as soon as you come in, here you go, you can work for 2 years if you like.
Simon, one of the criticisms that people raise all the time when we do this story about people unable to get workers, they say, hey, you're not paying enough. So, be clear, what were you offering? Because you were looking for a manager, weren't you? So, tell us what the deal was going to be.
Okay, so firstly, we'd be looking to put this person on $30 an hour, and then on top of that, they can have any bottom line profits that they can achieve. And I think with a good manager, they could be walking away $1,000 a week in their hand. They'd be taxed, obviously, on that as an income. But that's what I think a good manager could achieve with a setup like this. Being almost an owner-operator sort of setup, you'd have to be in there yourself, right in the nose of it, and running it yourself. So you'd be able to, potentially earn $100,000. But we just don't have anyone there that could walk into that.
So, Simon, just to be clear, you were offering a baseline salary, $30 an hour, and anything the cheese bar made above expenses, that person took away 100% of the profit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
How many applications did you get, Simon?
None, not one.
And
so, yeah.
What do you make of that?
Well, that's the thing. This is more than just a labour shortage. This is a labour crisis. And you look at speak to any hospo person, anyone in New Zealand, they're all crying out. And we've spoken to our neighbours in the Wynyard. We've spoken to everyone down there, going, hey, look, can you lend us a guy, someone for the weekend? Oh no, we're sort ourselves. How can we spare anyone for you guys? So we had to close the doors, and then and we keep hearing that our unemployment rates are record lows. Well, where's the measure for jobs available? Is that record highs? I mean, how many workers is this nation short?
So, Wynyard Quarter, right, it's a prime position, a lot of hospo, bars, cafes. What's going on down there, though?
So the weekday trade with this working from home philosophy that's come in now, it's gone. So for us, people coming and we were set up on the office side of the Wynyard. So we would get up to get the weekday. Hey, Wednesday, let's pop out for a bite to eat. We were serving cheese rolls there. We had a great offering. But during the week, we were literally taking $200. So we're going, okay, well, how do we take the wages and rent out of that? And then in the weekend, cranking, great. So then it was the weekday trade just gone because everyone's working from home. They're slowly coming back now. But that cultural now is really embedded in the CBD, and people are saying cost of living. Hey, I can. It's so much more cheaper for me to work from home. I don't need to pay for parking. I don't need to pay for coffee. I don't need to buy lunch. And I don't need to pay for childcare because I'm going to pick my kids up at 3 and bring them home, carry on working. It just stacks up to work from home. So suddenly that CBDs, it's just totally changed. The whole dynamic's changed for us, and this is an exact result of that.
Do you think it's dying without any chance of resus?
Oh, I don't know what's going to happen a few years down the track, but we've get our lease. We mitigated our risk by doing a short-term lease, so we can pull out of there reasonably comfortably, and then we'll look at it again further down the track. But we need some. In that area, we need a real injection of foot traffic, and without those businesses and those offices full, it just doesn't stack up at the moment.
So, Oamaru, situations vacant sign up there at the factory. Who are you looking for? What's the pitch?
Yeah, we're looking for cheesemakers assistants. We're looking for some cheese packers. We're not too bad. We're probably about half a dozen short at the moment, so our team's working really hard to fill those gaps. But I'm involved in local business community groups, and between all our manufacturing operations and different areas, we're looking for at least 200 people in Oamaru alone. So,
did you say 200? 200,
yeah.
Simon? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
and why would people want to move to Oamaru? Why would they want to move down there?
Okay, for starters, you can buy yourself a lovely, say, 3-bedroom home overlooking the sea for $550,000. We've got great schools. you come down here, walk straight into a job and into affordable housing, and then you've got lovely, safe community to bring up young kids in. It really ticks a lot of boxes, and we're seeing a big shift south from northern people at the moment.
Hey, before you go, Simon, again, congratulations on being voted New Zealand's favourite cheese company. What is the best fromage? What's the best cheese to serve with a side of crackers and a tiny little bit of disappointment? What's your choice?
I would go Five Forks. It's our Five Forks, half cow, half goat. It's 3 years old. It's really sophisticated, huge amount of flavour, and you can sit down at the end of the day and just savour that flavour along with probably a decent glass of red wine. Yeah.
Eat your feelings, Simon? Thank you. Really appreciate your time. That's Simon Berry from Whitestone Cheese. He's the managing director there. The biggest day on Christchurch's social calendar is back. The New Zealand Trotting Cup has returned to Addington Raceway, along with the crowds after 2 years of COVID disruptions. Our reporter Adam Burns and cameraman Samuel Rillstone are there.
Organisers describe today's Cup Day as like a family reunion. After 2 years of disruption, Addington Raceway Chief Executive Brian Thompson says they've bounced back after last year's event took a financial hit.
Yeah, it was pretty big, but we got through it. We've got a supportive membership group, and our board's very supportive, and we've got some strategies in place. But this year it's all about having people here and enjoying the day.
For esteemed Wood End Beach trainer Robert Dunn, there was an element of relief. Up to 100 horses had to be shifted from his son's stables as the Pegasus fire raged last week.
Everybody came from around the district to help out. Folks arrived as far away as West Melton and Yoldhurst, even after all the horses had gone, people we didn't even know. So it was cool, and everybody once the SOS went out, it was incredible to move 100 horses, less than 2 hours. That's an amazing feat.
Mr Dunn says Cup Day at Addington is revered by Cantabrians, particularly in harness racing circles.
And it's been great, and we generally get between 23,000 24,000 people here, and it's just one of those races that it doesn't stop a nation like the Melbourne Cup, but it certainly in harness racing does stop a nation.
The races is far more than just the trots. While there was no catwalk for this year's fashion in the field competitions, some spectators went old school with their attire.
My beautiful wife here, Abby's helped me put together this outfit. A couple of pieces, borrowing this from my father-in-law, Abby's dad, this vintage tie. She put my hat together and yeah.
Like previous incarnations, the betting, socialising and festivities remained a significant drawcard for the punters.
I think because we've gone through so much, I'm a small business owner and so is Rachel, and just to be able to, close for a day and come and relax, especially after COVID, it's just really nice.
Oh, how good.
It's so good. It's so nice to be out and about and getting to enjoy the horse racing and that,
Yeah. Is it just about the horse racing though? Are you here for it? Oh, absolutely. I love horses.
Also the social side, I guess. It's nice to see people out and about, all dressed up, having a good day,
Well, it's also about
with friends, good times.
It's about getting dressed up because you don't get to do this anywhere else. No. It's about getting dressed up and being able to do that. You don't get to do that anywhere else in Christchurch. So the races are for that.
With a crowd of more than 15,000, police were impressed with the behaviour of spectators earlier this afternoon. Senior Sergeant Phil Newton said everyone was having a great time.
It's been really good so far. It's a great day for the punters to come to the races. It's a good atmosphere, and at the moment everybody's behaving themselves.
But it's not over yet, with still plenty of punters filling the stands.
And it ain't over yet. If you would like to check out the video version of that story, we'll put it up on our web page. It is 23 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And it is business o'clock, which means ko taku hoa inai ko Nona Peltier, who joins us in the studio. Open banking, Nona, is expected to increase competition, make it easier for consumers to shop around for banking and financial services. What is it and why don't we have it?
Well, it's something that keeps coming up. We keep talking about it. The financial, fintech as it's called, are basically services that you can get on an app. Say, for example, Hatch, where you can buy and sell shares.
Yep.
Or shares, it's one of them. Okay, well, that's for shares. But we don't have that ease of access where banking is concerned. So if you've got a mobile app and you want to shop around for a mortgage, how do you do that? Because you don't have access to your consumer information that allows you to kind of say, oh, Here's
my accounts. This is what I've been spending my money on. Can I afford the repayments?
These are how many avocados I've been buying or what have you. Okay. Now, I know. Well, it's true, though, that these are the kinds of things which banks consider. If you have access to your information and it's provided in a sort of a framework where different financial services can exchange that information, all the easier for you to shop around.
They don't want you to shop around, though, no.
Well, I know, and that's one of the reasons why we do not have the framework we need. It wouldn't just benefit people who want to shop around for banking services. It would also benefit people who would like to shop around for a new power company, because it would give you your actual data on energy usage, so you could properly compare. It would also help you, for example, with telecommunication services. It's very difficult to compare one mobile service offering to another because there are the various different pieces that different telcos offer. So that is an issue. But why don't we have it? Because it's been years in promising. Other countries have it. The consumer data protection legislation has been promised. We heard more recently we were going to have it by the end of the year. In December 2019, the Minister of Consumer Affairs then said that was an urgent priority and they were going to get onto it. Well, today I got a message back from the Minister's office saying, basically, we're looking at it. We don't know. We're going to roll it out sector by sector. So that could be not for open banking. It could be for, say, power. And it's saying it will be announcing that in due course. It's not saying anymore, we'll see it by the end of the year. And certainly that's not what the market is expecting. The market is saying maybe we'll see it next year, maybe the middle of next year. So while we're talking about banking and competition, what we really need is the government to come up with that consumer data protection legislation, which they've been promising, so we can have open access to our services and our customer data. And so shop around.
Due course must be a pretty crowded place, Nona, because there's a lot of plans
there's a lot
waiting
of
due course.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, let's move on to a new survey that shines a light on the benefit of employing older workers. Now, this is interesting because we've just done an interview where someone is crying out for workers. What are the benefits if you get an older person?
Workers, now you would, not like yourself, for example, but people who are more than, say, 50 years old.
You've just offended a whole lot of people out there, by the way.
Well, I'm over 50, so I don't mind saying it like that.
So
because, older workers like myself, tend to be diligent, hardworking, as you know, and that over half of them would go beyond what the expectations are for their employers and make great employees. But
how do we know this to be true?
Well, I know it to be true. At least I can just tell you that right now. No, the fact is that 50 is not really very old. It's the new 30, as everyone knows. And older workers are not going to be retiring necessarily at 65. We don't have a mandatory retirement age, so why not work longer? And there's look at the President of the United States, or the last couple of them are well into their 70s. So, you're not all washed up by the time you're 50. You could definitely add a lot of value to a workplace. And also the experience. But yeah,
Whose survey is it, Nona?
This is a survey by a company called Frog Recruitment. And so, they're saying, look, give these people a go. If there's older workers in your community that are looking for work, or go out and find them. There's a lot out there.
Okay, Nona, let's do a quick twirl around the market.
Yeah, I was a bit puzzled today. Our market is down 1.25%. That's the NZX Top 50. That was a 138-point drop. And I was looking at why that would be. Some of the very big companies were down more than 1%. For example, Mainfreight, which is going to be reporting its financial result coming up. I'm not sure why suddenly it was like that, because normally we follow Asia, which is stronger today. But, it could be maybe something to do with the Productivity Commissioner being asked to investigate New Zealand's economic resilience to supply chain. Companies that benefited like Fletcher Building and so forth, maybe that's one of the reasons why they're down. Don't know. Can't understand it. In any case, overall, though, the market did perk up in Asia because there's still hope that China's going to ease those restrictions on COVID. And also that kept the the US dollar on the back foot. That helped the Kiwi 59.4 US cents today. There you go.
Wow.
And that's just off its recent high of 59.5. 91.7 Australian and 51.8 British pence.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier with business news there. It is 17 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know what you reckon. Nona says the survey for older workers is 50 plus. Older workers, 50 plus? What do you think? 2101. And you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines now. Anea Evie Mina Pitapita Kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. A national Muslim organisation says it's focused on taking the long road and working towards social cohesion following news of the Christchurch mosque terrorists' appeal. Brenton Tarrant was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in August 2020 after he pleaded guilty to the murder of 51 people in March 2019. Federation chairperson Abdur Razak says the appeal is a calculated move, an approach used by terrorists all over the world. The Finance Minister is defending the reappointment of Adrian Orr as Reserve Bank Governor in the face of fierce criticism from the opposition. ACT leader David Seymour says the government has rewarded one of the architects of the cost of living crisis by reappointing Mr Orr. Residents of a rural town by Auckland's Manukau Harbour are concerned for a child still missing after a boating incident on Sunday evening. 5 people were on board the boat that capsized near Clark's Beach. 1 has died and 3 were hospitalised. The trial of 2 brothers accused of the murder of 23-year-old Hayes Pehopa, who was knifed in the chest outside a bar in June last year, has continued today. Attempts to comfort and treat the stabbing victim have been described to a jury in Whangarei. And at the annual climate conference being held in Egypt, countries appear divided about the future role of natural gas. Several African countries are seeking to exploit the resource at a time European supply is dwindling. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, it appears all the motorway traffic is moving at its usual pace around the country. Our next news and weather is at 7 o'clock.
Kia ora rā e ho. Quality air ventilation is a key weapon in the war against COVID-19. Niwa air quality researchers have launched a research project to track ventilation and assess how our most vulnerable communities could be better protected from the virus. Jonty Dine reports.
It was a full classroom of healthy, happy kids enjoying a song and dance this morning at Whatungatiti Preschool in Papatoetoe. COVID has wreaked havoc in schools, with almost 200,000 children contracting the virus. To ensure our youth and other vulnerable communities are well suited to fight COVID and other respiratory infections, an initiative between Niwa and Māori Public Health has been set up to monitor air quality. Chief Executive at Hapai Te Hauora, Stella Hart, says there are simple behavioural barriers to better health.
Our communities can actually action some really practical steps to reduce transmission of infection, but how do we bring that into day-to-day? How do we actually make people aware of how the air quality or air ventilation within their homes or within their centres or within their residence remains really good so that we can then reduce those infection rates and keep our whānau out of hospitals.
The Niwa team will visit 4 locations throughout November and use CO2 measurements to calculate ventilation levels and transmission risk.
Where there are high Māori and Pacific populations or groupings, and so that's looking at spaces such as early childhood centres, marae, churches, aged care facilities and other such residents.
Ms Hart says health is integral to the togetherness of communities.
With the ultimate goal, I suppose, of helping those places to reduce the infection rate, we're also looking at other respiratory illnesses or infectious diseases that can be caught, especially with those groupings that have a high susceptibility to becoming unwell.
Whatungatiti Centre Manager Whaalele Whaiai says ventilation is a huge concern for all educational centres.
By being involved, I really wanted to use the opportunity to fill the gaps in our own understanding and knowledge of what we need to do to ensure best practice for good ventilation, good air quality to reduce infection risk in our centre.
The NIWA crew returned on Tuesday to check levels and gave Ms Whaiai and her team a glowing review.
We've only been on it this week, so they came back today, in fact, to go over our results from when everything was first installed, and they are really, really pleased because actually we have done really, really well. That's just using natural measures like all doors and windows open. So nothing fancy.
Ms Whaiai says after the disruptions of the pandemic, the children deserve to be in the classroom as much as possible.
We like them here because, you know, it's this is where they need to be to learn and to move on. But we also are aware of our responsibility to make it a safe place for them.
To make sure that while COVID's still circling, the air is as clear as possible.
It's 12 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The punters are revelling in Christchurch's first full-capacity Cup Day in 2 years. More than 15,000 turned out at Addington after crowds were banned at last year's event due to COVID. Our reporter Adam Burns has been taking it all in and he joins us now. Adam, tell us how the afternoon's gone.
Yeah, kia ora Lisa from a very jovial Addington Raceway. How have things gone today? I mean, relatively smoothly by all accounts. The weather has certainly played ball, and speaking to police earlier this afternoon, as you can hear, the music has just started up again. Speaking to police earlier this afternoon, they were relatively happy with the behaviour of the punters, but in terms of the biggest incident that has happened today, I think we had a stray horse just before the racing of race 2, just around midday. It took officials several minutes to get that under control, but apart from that, it's been a great day out.
You're tapping your toes to Beyonce's Crazy in Love. I think that's what it is in the background, Adam. Now, so organisers, they're pretty happy then, overall?
Yeah, I think they're pretty relieved just to have some semblance of normality restored. Of course, last year's event ran behind closed doors in 2020. COVID-19 restrictions reduced the crowd to 12,000. As you said at the top, more than 15,000 have attended today with a few more walk-ups. But I mean, you can hear it behind me. I mean, everyone's having a great day and being relatively well behaved.
So, has the main race gone ahead?
So, what was that, Lisa?
The main race, Adam. Sorry, Beyonce and Jay-Z are just getting in the way there for a second. The main race, has that gone ahead yet?
Yes, the main race has just gone on shortly and now everyone's ready to party. Look, copy that, they were the bookies' favourites at about $3.50 by the latest odds from the bookies. He won, retaining the title from 12 months ago. So if you put a wager on, if you opted for a more conservative wager, back the bookies, then you'll be going home laughing. But I mean, there's more to racing as you can hear.
Thank you, Adam, joining us from a packed and, quite jovial Addington there. Rabbits have been a pest in New Zealand since they were introduced more than 150 years ago, but cute little bunnies are perennially popular with children. But what happens when the kids get bored with them and the bunnies have nowhere to go? A Botany Downs-based rabbit rescuer who's amassed a vet bill of $10,000, yes, $10,000, says change is needed to protect rabbits. Jojo Naley of Raining Rabbits Rescue saves bunnies that are dumped and takes them to the veterinary clinic down the road. Checkpoint wanted to know more. Reporter Tom Taylor and cameraman Nick Monroe hopped into it.
Bunny, Fred. I can't sleep at night if I know that there's rabbits that I haven't helped.
Jojo Naley is the founder of Auckland's Raining Rabbits Rescue. In just over a year, her charity's taken in more than 200 rabbits, many severely neglected or dumped on the roadside where they're easy prey for feral cats. When it comes to the mistreatment of rabbits, Ms. Nellie's seen it all.
The one that always stands out is Chloe, who was tied up by her neck out on a property that wasn't fully fenced, and she was being fed bread, and at night time she was being put in a freezer box. It obviously wasn't turned on, but it was closed, so it's completely dark. And that's kind of what horror stories are made of for rabbits. Good, Mummy.
By the time the rabbits are rescued, they often require urgent treatment. Ms. Nellie and her team of 60 volunteers take care of them until they're ready for adoption. But that care, including vaccination and desexing, doesn't come cheap.
Hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands.
That's how much the rescue's spent on vet bills since Ms. Nellie took her first bunny into the clinic during lockdown last year. Dr. Kezia Lockhart of Mount Wellington Care Vets says they've taken reining rabbits on as a charity and now offers discounts for treatment.
Rabbits are one of the most neglected kind of pets that we see.
Now they're seeing bunnies in all states. Dr. Lockhart says people just don't understand how to care for their pet rabbits.
They need an area the size of this room, minimum, to keep their mental health and physical health. But unfortunately, often they're put in a kind of hutch that you can buy from the pet shop. And very often, unfortunately, children get bored of them and then parents don't know what to do with them.
The charity has a Give a Little page that's raised more than $6,000 so far, with all proceeds going directly to the vets. Ms. Nellie's grateful to everyone who's helped to keep reining rabbits afloat, but says more could be done to protect bunnies in the first place.
We've had so many people message us and say that we really need you to take our rabbits. If you don't, we're going to have to release them. It's an awful pressure to put on a rescue.
The SPCA's Dr. Alison Vaughan says that while rabbits are thought of as easy pets, nothing could be further from the truth. She says although there's no current code of welfare for rabbits, a draft is in the works. But in the meantime, she encourages pet owners to do some thorough research before taking the plunge. Ms. Nellie says a code of welfare for rabbits could go a long way towards ending the mistreatment of bunnies, hopefully meaning fewer end up on her doorstep.
Oh my goodness, I know they're pests in some cases, but the cutest little bunnies in that item. Do have a look at the video version from Tom and Nick. It'll be on our webpage. When most people get to a certain age, they think about slowing down, but not for a team from England about to tackle one of the most treacherous races in the world, the Dakar Rally. It's certainly not an event for amateurs, but this is for charity, the BBC's Philip Norton reports.
We're going to experience temperatures from -10 up to +40s.
10 days off-road driving through deserts, mountains, rocky terrain, so it's going to be fairly tough and fairly challenging.
They're about to take part in one of the world's most dangerous races, following the route of the original Paris to Dakar Rally.
I've had a dream ever since I watched the first ever Paris-Dakar. It's something I loved watching, and yeah, maybe one day. That day has turned up, but coupled with it, we're raising money for Help Heroes, a charity which is very close to my heart, being ex-military.
We go through the Atlas Mountains to start with, through Morocco, down into Mauritania, the Western Sahara, and end up in the Rose Lake in Senegal.
And it's all being done in this buggy.
It's a beast. It's not like driving anything else what you've driven. Very, very punchy, very quick. It's so light and obviously so open. So yeah, it's very exciting.
Today's training is at the Defence School of Transport in Leconfield, being watched by family.
Seen the car loads of times, but not this first time I've actually seen it being driven.
How do you feel?
So proud of them. I really can't believe they're doing it.
What are your hopes then for when they go and do this?
Just make it to the finish line in one piece, really.
I'm sure they will, like the work they've put in.
The route will take them 6,000 kilometres down the western coast of Africa. They'll face all kinds of terrain, like the sand dunes of the Western Sahara. And that's why they're having to do training at places like this.
It's a great opportunity for DST, it's a great opportunity for the local area to be involved in something like this. You know, raising money for Help for Heroes. There's not many areas where they'll be able to facilitate this sort of training, so it's great to have them here.
But suddenly, a problem.
Ooh. Yeah. That's an issue.
It gives us practice because we've never had to do it at all yet, even though we've had the wheels and tyres off, but not out in the field as such, so it's ideal.
I'm the youngest team member. I'm just 53. Nev's 65, but one of our support team, Gavin Dalton, I think he'll be 68 by the time we go.
Knock it on a bit to be doing this kind of thing through a desert.
That's more of the challenge, to see if we can actually do it. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard.
And they'll find out just how tough when the race starts in January.
Pretty gutsy. Or foolish, not sure which. A lot of you are getting in touch about our interview with Carmel Cepoloni about emergency housing and a potential exit plan or lack thereof. This listener says, for goodness sake, the government doesn't have a magic wand. And this from another listener, the government can't offer an exit date on emergency housing in Rotorua, the same as they cannot remove the tax reduction on petrol. Once you're in a rabbit hole, there is really no way out. The government is stuck. It's hard not to blame the previous government who sold off hundreds of state houses, this person says. And another says, this may sound cynical, but I think the brutal reality is that if the median voter cared more about the plight of these poor people, this or previous governments would have solved the problem long ago. Our leaders follow the votes. I'm not a Labour supporter, this listener says, but it's obvious they inherited a landscape devoid of the necessary infrastructure to support the growing homeless population. To think otherwise is being an uneducated buffoon wanting to score political points. Thank you for your feedback. Another person says they're not building homes. Half of the builds are apartments, 1 bed, 5-level walk-ups. In Masterton, where I'm from, the local council stopped building social houses and left it to a local housing trust, another listener says. It's been a complete disaster. On the subject of jobs, someone says you had a story on Ukrainian who couldn't or wasn't allowed to work, and here's this Oamaru man who can't get workers. What's going on? Says Sandy. Another says immigration is short of workers as well, takes time to train someone up for the role, and who would want to work there as well, says Jan. On the subject of Oamaru and the cheese factory looking for workers, I've moved from Auckland to Oamaru 5 years ago, this person says, best move ever, but don't tell everyone. Whoops, sorry.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Ngā mihi o te pō. Kia ora, I'm Evie Ashton. The government can't give a deadline for phasing out emergency motel accommodation, but says it will reveal the results of a review and redesign by the end of the year. It's seeking resource consent for 13 Rotorua motels to keep operating as emergency housing for another 5 years. Motels were supposed to be a short-term solution, but the bill for the scheme is topping $1 billion since Labour took office in 2017. The Minister for Social Development, Carmel Cepoloni, has told Checkpoint there's no time frame for ending the scheme.
It would be a huge problem if we weren't building the houses, but we are building the houses and we're seeing them go up at a record rate. And so the work is underway, and so that by doing that, then moving forward, we'll be able to resolve the issue that we have with emergency housing.
Carmel Cepoloni says the government has had to respond to decades of underinvestment in housing. A law expert says without court documents, it's hard to speculate on the Christchurch mosque terrorist's grounds for appealing his conviction and sentence. Massey University adjunct law professor Chris Gallivan says a defendant usually has to prove their guilty pleas weren't made voluntarily or they were not of sound mind in order to be granted leave to appeal a conviction.
It's not a straightforward exercise for him to file an appeal and for that to be automatically heard. There first has to be an application for it to be heard at all because it's so out of time. And that's not given lightly by the court, so it might actually fall at the first hurdle.
The appeal comes more than 2 years after the gunman pleaded guilty to the murder of 51 people in Christchurch in 2019. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2020. Residents of a rural town by Auckland's Manukau Harbour are concerned for a school-aged child still missing after a boating incident on Sunday evening. 5 people were on board the boat that capsized near Clark's Beach in the harbour. 1 has died and 3 were hospitalised. Our reporter Lucy Sia reports from Waiuku.
Residents of a town where fishing and boating are a big part of the culture are on edge. Many are concerned for the missing child, who attends Waiuku's Sandspit Road Primary School. One local says she's still holding on to hope that they will be found. Many members of the community are searching for the child along the eastern coastline of the Awhitu Peninsula, which faces Clark's Beach, where the boat capsized. Police are continuing an aerial search.
Attempts to comfort and treat a stabbing victim have been described to a jury in Whangarei. Two brothers are on trial accused of murdering 23-year-old Hayes Pehopa, who was knifed in the chest outside Central City bars in June last year. One witness said there was blood coming from the victim's mouth as he lay on the ground, but his eyes were open. They told Mr. Pehopa, "You've got this, bro," so he didn't feel alone. The witness also noticed a discarded knife that looked like a giant machete and alerted police. The jury also heard from St John and doctors who spent 30 minutes trying to resuscitate Mr. Pehopa before pronouncing him dead. Developing countries are urging richer nations to provide financial support to combat the effects of climate change on the first day of the COP27 summit in Egypt. Small island countries have called for a mechanism for immediate funding following a climate-related disaster. A Jamaican government minister, Matthew Samuda, says an agreement is urgently needed.
We are at a tipping point. We have significantly dealt with our macroeconomic affairs over the last 12 years. 12 years ago, we were an economic basket case. We have restructured our economy to put ourselves into the category of responsible nations. We, however, now face the scourge of climate change, which is outside of our capacity to spend, to invest, and to protect ourselves.
The UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, says humanity has a choice: cooperate or die. Police in Auckland are urging rugby fans to celebrate safely ahead of the Rugby League World Cup semi-finals this weekend. They say a woman has been injured after slipping from the bonnet of a moving car while celebrating in Mangere overnight. Emergency services were called just after 1 a.m. after the woman slid from the hood and was run over. She was taken to Middlemore Hospital, where she remains in a serious but stable condition. Police are urging revellers to take care celebrating. And researchers in Canada have discovered that bass frequencies play a key role in getting people dancing. Neuroscientists at McMaster University say participants in a small-scale study moved around 12% more on a dance floor when a very low-frequency bass was played. The BBC's Jessica McKellen reports.
Can't stop moving when the bass comes on? Scientists think they know why. For this study, they wired participants up with motion-sensing headbands and realised that they danced more vigorously when the bass came on, even if the frequency was too low to be heard. It stimulated parts of the skin and inner ear systems that are closely connected to the body's motor system. This controls people's movement. The stimulation bypasses the brain's prefrontal cortex and happens without conscious awareness.
Finally, in sport, Copy That has claimed back-to-back New Zealand Trotting Cup titles at Addington Raceway in Christchurch. Trained by Ray Green and driven by Blair Orange, the 2021 winner hit the front early and never lost the lead, pulling away in the final stages. Majestic Cruiser finished second, with Spankum coming home third. That's the news.
Tonight on RNZ National, we've got eyes in the skies with powerful telescopes for the lunar eclipse. The last one you'll see till 2025. Self-described chief twit, we analyse Elon Musk's first few days in charge of Twitter. And all-you-can-eat restaurants are popular, but what happens to the leftovers? The food chain finds out for us. That and a whole lot more on Nights with Karen Hay after 7 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, periods of rain, possibly heavy and thundery, gradually easing tomorrow. For Waikato and Bay of Plenty, cloud increasing. A few showers tomorrow, some heavy in the afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine today, but isolated showers south of Hastings. Rain spreading south tomorrow morning, possibly heavy in Gisborne. From Waitomo to Wellington and Waidadapa, including the Central High Country, also for Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Mainly fine, but isolated afternoon and evening showers inland, some possibly heavy. Canterbury and Otago, mainly fine and warm, but a few afternoon and evening showers, possibly heavy tomorrow with cloud increasing later. Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods. A few showers mainly near the coast. And Rekohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy with 1 or 2 showers clearing tomorrow morning. The time is 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
No, mihi, Evie, I'm still back with the low bass beat.
I mean, how can you not move?
Making more people dance and special motion sensing headbands. We got to get ourselves some of those because I bet they look super special.
You could wear them while you're vacuuming, turn it on.
Yeah, how to make dancers look uber cool. Thanks, Evie. No mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Despite rising COVID case numbers, hospitalisations and reinfections, the government has no plans to launch an annual COVID vaccination booster for the majority of people. But the Minister in charge has revealed it's eyeing up a multi-variant vaccination that could be made available to our most vulnerable next year if needed. Dr Aisha Verrill says the government's still getting expert advice on whether a wider ongoing COVID immunisation program is needed.
I think it's important to be clear that we don't have evidence of waning immunity. Studies are showing that people are having fewer antibodies. But if you're a healthy adult who has had your 3 doses, you still have evidence of good protection against severe disease that will keep you out of hospital. I think that's really important. That's why the boosters are being targeted at people who need them at the higher risk group.
Minister, to be clear, will we have an annual vaccination program for COVID for the bulk of the population?
Look, I think that is uncertain, and at the moment what experts are saying is it's more likely to be re-offers of boosters to people at high risk. But of course we continue to watch whether there is true waning immunity as opposed to just decreasing antibodies in people who are at lower risk as well. We haven't seen a sign of that. People who've had 3 doses and a healthy younger adult are protected very well by that regime.
But what about internationally, right? So I'm just curious, when do you consider someone to no longer be fully vaccinated? Because in a number of countries, they say after 9 months from your last vaccination, they consider your vaccination status to have expired. So when do you consider someone to be no longer fully vaccinated?
So we have the guidelines on the first and second booster, and if you're eligible for those and you've had them, then you are fully vaccinated. But we are keeping this issue under review, Lisa. I think we're very conscious that there are risks with vaccination as well as benefits, and we do need to make sure that we balance those risks, and that is what our experts are considering at the moment. Meanwhile, we continue to do all of the planning we need to do to make sure that we have an ongoing vaccination program, including making arrangements for the purchase of bivalent vaccines for Omicron-specific strains.
So what plans have you got for the purchase of combination vaccines? For example, like Australia has approved the use of a 2-strain vaccine.
So we're not waiting. We have MedSafe reviewing some of the evidence for bivalent vaccines already and getting expert advice on what regime we should use, if we should use it. And then we also have all the arrangements for operational deployment of the vaccine early in next year underway with Te Whatuora and Whanake.
But from what you're saying, not everyone would get that. You would just offer that, as a booster to those people who are considered vulnerable?
Yeah, Lisa, I don't want to get ahead of the advice that I've been given. Obviously, our experts are considering who should receive it, and they consider whether it should be for risk groups or for the whole population. But what I've heard to date is suggesting that will be targeted at risk groups.
Have you actually given up on encouraging people to get boosted? Because a quarter of the people eligible for their 3rd vaccination haven't bothered, and about 60% of those eligible for the 4th haven't had it either.
No, we haven't, but we have had to change our tactics for that. Do remember that not everyone eligible can get it, because if they've recently had COVID, they're contraindicated to having the vaccine for another 3 months. However, we continue to make sure we make direct approaches to people we know are eligible through our data set. That might be through text messages, or it could be through telehealth services and iwi providers reaching out to them directly. We do still do some advertising, but of course we know that we've done a lot of that, and I think everyone's seen those ads, so have had to taper back how much we're spending there.
I just want to be clear on this next point, Minister. If you were not going to offer an annual across-the-board COVID vaccination, are you telling people who had their booster, and the only booster they're eligible to have maybe a year ago, that they're sweet, nothing to worry about?
No, I haven't said that. And that's precisely what we're getting advice on at the moment. And we need the officials and experts to go through that process of giving us that advice. But we haven't been advised that healthy people will need an annual booster at this stage. We're making arrangements to make sure that we've got the operational plans and purchasing arrangements there should we make a decision to use one of these bivalent vaccines. Just to be clear, there is no evidence that people who are distant from their course of 3 doses and are healthy have waning protection against severe disease. They do have reducing antibodies, but that shouldn't be confused with waning immunity that protects you from severe disease.
We're getting a large-ish number of reinfections, though, aren't we? Second-time infections, and I think your own ministry advice says that potentially, actually, those infection rates could be twice as high given underreporting and the definition being changed.
Yeah, so a really important point about the vaccination program is it is not designed to prevent infection. It is intended to prevent severe disease, hospitalisations and deaths. And so it is not the advice that I receive is very clear that we shouldn't be targeting vaccines, how we schedule them, what we purchase, according to trying to block infection, because it won't succeed.
From a political point of view, does this government just want to stop talking about COVID, want to forget about it now?
I'm here talking to you about it now, Lisa. Of course not.
And that was COVID Response Minister Dr Aisha Verrill, and apologies for the slightly patchy phone at times. It's difficult to get a strong connection to the beehive. The world is on the highway to climate hell. That's the latest slogan out of COP27, the annual climate summit being held in Egypt. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says humanity has a choice: cooperate or die. One thing is clear, progress on climate change has been woefully inadequate across the globe. The BBC's Justin Rowlett has this report.
In the Egyptian desert, world leaders have been gathering to try and tackle the climate challenge, including the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, arriving in Egypt for what are expected to be some of the most difficult discussions in the 3-decade history of these climate summits.
Global temperatures keep rising, and our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator.
Mr. Sunak said acting on climate also makes economic sense.
Putin's abhorrent war in Ukraine and rising energy prices across the world are not a reason to go slow on climate change. They are a reason to act faster.
But developing nations say they need the rich world to deliver on its promises of finance.
This backdrop, the lengthy discussions at COPs, with its stalling, delaying tactics and procrastination that have hampered implementation and delivery, is simply cruel and unjust.
It has been a year of climate-related disasters around the world. Dry weather in the North African country of Mauritania led to extensive fires last month.
At the Glasgow Climate Conference last year, countries agreed to raise their carbon-cutting ambitions every year. But just 29 out of 193 have done so, and only one of them, Australia, significantly raised its game. So where does that leave us? So take a look at this. This is how much emissions have been growing. They've been increasing steadily. Now, the UN says we need to cut them almost in half by 2030, so in just 7 years' time. But this is the direction the world is currently going. Now, the UN says that puts us on track for a temperature rise of almost 3 degrees centigrade. It would be, it says, a catastrophe for humanity.
For the first time in the history of these conferences, there is a dedicated youth zone, and the young people are frustrated.
Nothing new has been said. This is the 27th COP of its kind. It's older than I am.
We're not just here as symbols of the future. We're here as representatives of the climate crisis being lived through us. My hometown flooded in Mexico when I was 13 years old. That's why I'm a climate activist.
We keep having to pressure them, and that is why we are here as the young people applying that pressure, and why we won't back down, because we believe that another world is possible, and it is possible to make those policy changes.
What do we want?
These young people worry their voice isn't being heard, however loud they are. But they hope that by being here at the conference, they will begin to influence the decisions that will shape all our futures.
It's 18 after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. President Joe Biden and his predecessor Donald Trump have been making their final pitches to American voters ahead of tomorrow's crucial midterm elections. The vote, which will decide control of Congress, could seriously hamper the Democratic agenda for the next 2 years. The BBC's Justin Webb has been looking at the issues dividing America, historically and now.
America has, sometimes, been united. The Apollo missions, the first man on the moon, were a source of national pride. But it came at the end of a rough decade. A decade of struggle for civil rights, of resistance, of assassination.
Never have so many people participated in an event with such a feeling of hope and friendship.
So united, yes, but disunited as well. You can overemphasize the idea that Americans were ever entirely on the same page. But the compelling narrative since the Second World War was of progress, and national progress, the whole nation moving on, facing challenges, extending rights for all Americans.
Good evening. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions. The majority,
as the Supreme Court did repeatedly, and famously with Roe v. Wade, that gave all American women the right to an abortion.
This great nation will endure.
It didn't matter who was in power. From Franklin Roosevelt and his post-Depression New Deal, the direction seemed clear. Even the sunny opponent of liberal America, Ronald Reagan, who changed so much in the 1980s, didn't alter the fundamental view of national progress and national rights that by definition everyone could access.
I am not frightened by what lies ahead, and I don't believe the American people are frightened by what lies ahead.
But now Roe v. Wade is gone, and perhaps a lot more. The Trump-appointed justices here at the Supreme Court have got the bit between their teeth. The Conservative majority on the court seem to want a grand reset, along with millions of Americans who never really signed up for national progress, national rights. They want less power here in Washington and much more in the individual states. The birth of this new settlement, if that's what it is hard fought. This summer, governors from Texas and Florida flew migrants who'd crossed from Mexico up to posh Martha's Vineyard, an upmarket holiday island off the northeast coast. These Venezuelans were caught in the crossfire of a row between state governments that feel overwhelmed by illegal immigration and a smart set, a national rights set, wealthy left-wing Americans who, in the view of the governors, tend to employ South Americans as gardeners but otherwise not think too much about them. These conflicts might grow in the new America.
Freedom? It's under attack in your state.
Of course, some state governors will seize the power to keep their idea of progress alive. They'll make use of the freedoms the court seems happy for them to have, provided the nation doesn't have to follow. Ever since the events of January the 6th here at Capitol Hill, there's been loose talk of a new civil war in America. It's not impossible, but perhaps way more likely is a state-by-state idea of the nation. In a sense, the original idea, fractured, but still in business. Ukraine's state energy company are doing everything they can to avoid a total blackout after Russian missile strikes. They're urgently repairing power stations, power cuts are ongoing, and temperatures are near freezing. And while Ukrainians are being warned to prepare for the worst-case scenario, the country's people are once again showing their resilience. CNN's Christian Amanpour reports from the outskirts of Kiev.
The bridge into Irpin in the Bucha district was a lifesaver for those who managed to flee the early Russian advance. The horrors of what those troops left behind have been fully exposed. And Mikhailina, the deputy mayor of the Bucha region, is taking us to meet residents who are rebuilding. But throughout this heavily destroyed residential area, it's a race against winter. as temperatures start to plunge and blackouts continue. Money is tight, but spirits are high. At the very least, they need to replace glass in the windows and patch up holes the size of tank and artillery rounds. Tetiana shows us pictures of her apartment's small bedroom. Destroyed in March, rebuilt now. Her story is hair-raising and miraculous. Hunkering down in the basement for 10 days under Russian occupation, the Russian tanks arriving just 15 minutes after she fled. When we left, they were shooting at us from behind, she tells me. Now I realize what kind of a second birthday I got, what kind of a gift, because those people who left right after us were shot. As this city tries to put the pieces back together again, there's another, more sensitive, perhaps even more difficult kind of rebuilding underway. The UN Children's Fund UNICEF has placed pop-up tents full of warmth, light and care. All these children have been traumatized and some have been forced to witness unspeakable horrors. This is Bucha district, after all, ground zero for Russia's war crimes. Eugene Lopatin is the regional manager for this program.
They started to tell some really cruel things. I cannot even describe how cruel they were. Some children saw invaders raping their mother or beating their father.
Ksenia volunteers as a psychologist here, seeing parents whose children have had to hide with them in silence or spend long periods with no bathroom breaks. And the body remembers this, and even after reaching safety, the child cannot go to the toilet, she says. It's the same with speech. The parents have told them to keep quiet, so the child closes its mouth and does not know when they can talk again. And so they turn to these kinds of games, and Katerina, the volunteer art therapist, says she sees them gradually come out of their shells and start to smile and connect again. They seem to forget about their inner stress when they're making something like this, says Katerina. Back in the construction zone, Mikhailina has her own harrowing story of loss and recovery. She says her first husband was killed in Donbass during the first Russian invasion in 2014.
Like when you lost your beloved, you have to find a new motivation how to live, how to go on, how to feel alive again. So when I thought what would motivate me to live, I decided that, look, I'd like to have a boy called Glib, as my first husband wanted. And I've met another man and realized that plan, that's fantastic.
Australian drivers are feeling the pain at the petrol pump, and they're blaming, in part, the exchange rate with the US dollar. Global oil prices have actually fallen in recent months, but across the ditch, prices at the pump have gone up. As the ABC's John Daly reports, they're still paying considerably less than Kiwis.
Being a weekend warrior is a costly hobby these days, but expensive fuel isn't deterring enthusiasts at a four-wheel drive expo in Perth. Elizabeth Harding is the chair of the WA Four-Wheel Drive Association.
That travel is our zen. It's good for our mental health. It gets us out and about in the fresh air, countryside. I think they definitely will have to cut down on their beer budget, and it might be the cheese and bicky budget as well. It's not the double brie. It might just be, the cheddar that we have. You balance it out so you can still get out there.
Unleaded petrol prices rose by 11.1 cents last week. According to analysis from ComSec, the lower Aussie dollar added 4 cents to pump prices last week and has driven them up by 13 cents a litre since the start of the year. Australasian Convenience and Petroleum Marketers Association Chief Executive Mark McKenzie says the weak exchange rate is offsetting any discounts from falling oil prices. He says the current oil prices are around $90 a barrel. If the Australian dollar was still at 73 US cents, as it was earlier this year, that would equate to 123 Aussie dollars a barrel.
But at the current exchange rate of 64, it's at $140 a barrel. So within that context, you're actually seeing about a 13 to 14% increase as a result of the devaluation of the Australian dollar over the last 6 months.
There's also a very stark difference between the price of petrol and diesel. The average price of unleaded petrol was just under $1.96 a litre last week, still well below the peak of $2.12 a litre just before the fuel excise was cut in March. On the other hand, the average price of diesel has reached a new high for the year of $2.36 a litre, to the frustration of four-wheel drivers.
No, I'm not happy to pay the extra, but it's just the fact of life.
Do you even know why unleaded and diesel, there's such a difference between the two?
No, I don't fully understand why there is, but it certainly is a big discrepancy.
The discrepancy between diesel and petrol is a result of interrupted supply from Russia and the increasing demand for diesel in European power generation. But Mark McKenzie says China has also limited its own exports of crude and refined oil to shore up its own domestic energy security.
China's year-to-date contribution to the Asia-Pacific pool is 28% lower than it was same time last year.
Economists expect the Aussie dollar still has further to fall as the US lifts interest rates more aggressively than Australia's Reserve Bank.
Back home, let's get to some more of your feedback before we head off. On housing, Chris says we've had 15 years of underinvestment in state housing and 15 years of rampant immigration pushing housing values through the roof. Of course, there's nowhere for our most vulnerable to live. On the subject of COVID, this listener says, can I ask why people who are vulnerable can get a booster yet aren't eligible for funded COVID medicine? It makes no sense, they say. On the subject of cute bunnies, wow, cute but pesky, occupying Botany Downs. This person says, I have a solution to unloved pet rabbits. Ban rabbits as pets in the country, along with cats, mustelids, which are, stoats and ferrets. Rodents as well, says Andrew. Another person says, for goodness sake, bunnies indeed. And introduce species which breeds like, rabbits. Shouldn't be kept as pets. Culls, more like it. Yes, but there is no denying they are a pest, but man, they're cute, fluffy, cuddly looking things, aren't they? And that is the problem. Now, the Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything from the program, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m. on First Up, they'll be in the United States as the midterm elections get underway. That's going to be super interesting. Do tune in, 5 a.m. Kaua e wariwari te atatero e a mātou kōrero, and do check out all our stories and videos. We'll pop them up on our webpage so you can check them out. Have a wonderful evening. Back again tomorrow, same place, same time.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou. Good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. The Minister for Social Development, Carmel Sepuloni, has told Checkpoint there's no time frame for ending emergency motel accommodation. A law expert says without court documents, it's hard to speculate on the Christchurch mosque terrorist's grounds for appealing his conviction and his sentence. And developing countries are urging richer nations to provide financial support to combat the effects of climate change on the first day of the COP27 summit in Egypt. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Māpuna, te hōtaka e whakatere hia ana e au e Julia Wilcox, ia te rā horoi, hei te pūtūtanga, i runga i te reo itirangi, o Aotearoa. Māpuna celebrates Aotearoa legends, leaders, artists, and you. That's Māpuna every